For this game, I played a CrazyHouse game against an opponent of 2387 rating. When I looked at the leaderboards for CrazyHouse, is this it? Okay, so my opponent was 2380 something, which means that he was number 2 in the world for CrazyHouse. And after we played the game, he dropped a bunch of points. So I want to show you the game that we played. And it's significant just because of my opponent's experience, right? So he's been playing CrazyHouse a lot to get to that point. 2380 something, almost 2400 rating on CrazyHouse, which is crazy. So we can go over this game and see how I managed to beat him. And the time control for this one is 3+2, meaning that we have 3 minutes each player, but then every time you make a move, you're added 2 seconds increment. So the game started, and remember that actually CrazyHouse is a variant of chess where whenever you capture your opponent's piece, you have that piece in like a graveyard, which you can use later on instead of a regular move. So you can just drop a piece from your graveyard onto the board, and it can land anywhere. I mean, the only thing that you cannot do with CrazyHouse is that you cannot drop your pawns in the promotion squares. That's it. Everything else still counts, I think. So I went like d4, my opponent went there, and then I just developed my pieces. So here on CrazyHouse, obviously when I play my regular games of chess, I just go c4. But then if they just capture a pawn and I try to attack it, they can always just drop their other pawn that they won to defend it. So it's literally just giving a piece for no reason, or some material for no reason. So I like to go for the Jovava London in the CrazyHouse. So after all regular development, this is a very common idea to just put the bishops here. So whenever you trade, you capture back with the pawn and you're controlling certain key squares in the middle. So I do the same thing, but my opponent doesn't capture, which is fine. Development. Now prevent any knight jump to not capture my bishop. And here my opponent just drops a bishop here. I'm not sure. I think the idea here is, so I capture and he captures with a pawn to undouble his pawns here and create a little DNA structure. But now I just drop a bishop here, just attacking some weaknesses. But my opponent goes with double bishop there. I move my queen out of the pin, and then I don't even know what I do. Ooh, here. Okay. So obviously, in a regular game of chess, you don't want to just sacrifice some pieces. But I like to sacrifice sometimes some material for pawns because the pawns are hard to get through, right? So in this case, I capture and I have a nice little skewer on the queen with the rook. And you may be thinking, oh yeah, you're dropping a couple pieces for one piece, but I also got a pawn, which after this trade I takes. I can first of all, I fork the bishops. And my opponent goes for this sacrifice. So these sacrifices are very scary because if there's a pawn here, if somehow they can just win your queen or something, they can just drop a queen and give you checkmate. So you still gotta be careful here. But I still took the bishop. I guess I didn't remember. And I put my bishop here on h1. So that if my opponent goes for some sort of checkmate or something, I can just always capture with a bishop. My opponent goes with pawn drop and I just capture it. And I'm actually happy with this because my opponent can have a bunch of bishops, but I have a lot of pawns, which are significant to the defense of the king. Anyways, my opponent goes for the check, gets my rook, I capture back, and after bishop here, I just start putting the pawn here on this place. So the whole point of the pawn here is that I don't want any ideas of, let's say I make a random move, right? I make a random move, pawn here. My opponent has captures. And if I take back, there is a knight drop that my opponent would have from the graveyard. So knight drop, check, forking the king and the queen. That's the whole point of putting the pawn here. So my opponent captures, I take like this, and then there is no knight check to fork the pieces, right? And you can see the knight here. My opponent has a rook, knight, and a bishop available. I have 2 pawns, 2 bishops, and a rook. Okay, so bishop there. I go with the pawn. Takes, takes. Check. And I didn't really believe this one. So I captured the knight. And I just bring my king back because now I'm seeing, okay, so I was seeing here, if I go king here, there's a pawn fork on the king and the rook, and that's sad. And if I go forward, I think I'm gonna die pretty soon. So I go there to bait the rook check. So rook check, and then king here, and then there's no pawn fork. That was the whole point of that move. My opponent goes there, and now I do this move, which I'm actually pretty proud of, because my opponent captures, and then there's no, so for example here, if I move my rook, I am dead with checkmate in 1, because my opponent just drops the rook here. The pawn is defended by the knight. Move the rook, I die. So I just go to a counter attack. So here he does this, and now he gives the pawn, and I just give the piece back, but I'm winning a piece with a pawn always, you know. And now there are no active pieces on this side. If he gives me a check with the rook, I just want to put a pawn. So my opponent just captures the knight. I capture with the pawn. I don't want to give the queen because then there are some ideas of checkmate. My opponent goes for sacrifices, and I bring my king forward. It's kind of hard to bring my king back because of any checks with the rook. He has 3 rooks still. So now he tries to create a mating net to give me some checkmate pretty soon, maybe not right now. So I just drop a pawn here to prevent any rook drop here. And the good thing is, like, my pawn is always defending this little squares. My opponent goes for a promotion, and I don't care about the promotion much, so I just still put a bishop there, check, king there, and now we're pretty safe. It's scary, but we're pretty safe. There, my opponent only has hard pieces, which are the rooks, and you know, it's fine. If they put a rook, whatever, like he did, I just drop another pawn. I'm not moving this pawn forward because of, if for some reason he captures my bishop, he can give me a check like this. So I'm just dropping extra pieces here to create a fortress. So rook there, bishop there. Now I'm attacking his rook, and my bishop is defended there. My opponent goes with bishop there, and I just go for a knight drop, attacking the queen. So the good thing about CrazyHouse is that one of the things you need to take advantage of is getting some tempo on your opponent's pieces. You can start dropping more pieces as you're attacking your opponent's more valued pieces, I guess, like the queen. So my opponent goes with this queen here, and I go for another attack on the queen. And here I need to be careful because if my opponent, I didn't see this before, but my opponent, if he takes my knight, there's a knight checkmate here because the bishop is covering everything. So now I attack the queen, skewering the queen under the rook. There, takes, queen takes. So that's the whole point, I think. So if I capture like this, I'm dead because there's a checkmate here. So here, I have to capture like this. And after knight there, I have to only go up. The good thing about this, look at the time. I have like a minute. My opponent has 30 seconds. My opponent here doesn't have any other pieces. My opponent doesn't have any other pieces to drop. And I have a bunch of pieces to drop. I can work with all this. My opponent's pieces are all here and like all covered by my pawns. My opponent captures my queen. Take your time. With all the pieces that we have, what do you do? Right? Take your time to find a continuation. And you can pause the video right now. I'm going to continue with the explanation. All right? 3, 2, 1. So the continuation is now look for the forceful checks. Right now, if I try to be defensive about things, I can probably get checkmated because he can just drop a queen and like it can be uncomfortable. Because if you think, I can attack the knight, he can drop a queen here. You attack the knight, queen here. Is that almost my checkmate? Almost. I don't know. He can sacrifice some pieces and start giving you checks with pawns or something. Like he starts winning. So here you have to be forceful with knight check, sacking the bishop. And if, for example, my opponent goes with king here, I can just drop a rook or a queen, and that's checkmate. So he has to capture this bishop. Now I have a rook drop, sacking my knight. And now here we can finish the game with queen checkmate, blocking all the squares for the king. So that's how we were able to win against the number 2 crazy house player in the world. It's just insane, man. So his rating was 2387, and as you can see here, leaders, so he's at 2370, and you can tell by this game here. So CoachVChess, I won 15 points and he dropped 22.3 points. That was a crazy game. I mean, hence the name Crazy House. But just wanted to show it to you guys. And yeah, we're doing things, not just in regular chess, but we're doing things in duck chess, Crazy House, and whatever we can. I mean, obviously we're also losing games in Crazy House. Doesn't mean that like I'm winning all the games, right? But Crazy House is very, it's not so easy to predict because pieces drop, and like if you're in time trouble, things can change, right? So your thinking starts changing. I don't know, it's kind of hard to focus because first of all, you need to keep track of what is going on the board, and then you have extra pieces that can just fly off the sky and just slap you there and checkmate you, right? So you got to be careful.